What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Neil Young's studio catalog, in which I review and then rank the albums in chronological order, currently on his 27th officially released studio album, 2003's Greendale. Yeah, Greendale. They made a TV show out of this, inspired by the community college in this city. Really funny show. Doesn't have anything to do with the album, but it's pretty good. Not really. And yeah, so this is Neil Young's musical novel. Really heavy on lyrics. There's a lot of story to be told here. The story is something I will say I have tried to dive into a lot over the years, but am sort of hindered by the musical component of this album, which isn't a bad musical component, but it's a very, I don't know if unambitious is the right word, but so there's a lot of lyrics. And the story of Greendale, it's this fictional community. I believe it's in Northern California where Neil lives and is from, or at least is, not from. We know he's from Canada, but he lived up in Northern California. And this story is a very 2003 story, post 9/11 here in the States. You definitely have some very, I don't know, metaphorical is the word, but very like references that are obviously, I think, to a post 9/11 world. This thing happened, trust the government, stuff's happening overseas, seeds are being planted, but we've got you, so just put your faith in us. But Neil, at this point, no longer being a Reagan Republican, is questioning those things a little much, or at least planting seeds of doubt. There's your typical Neil threads. If there's grandpa, a lot of grandpa. We got grandpa's interview. We got grandpa ranting about things the way they are. Grandma's living in the past, back in the summer of love, and doesn't really seem to be in the present day. We get a lot of sort of cries against what the media does to us, and just like how the media is way too present in our lives in these days. We just get a very Neil, without getting too specific, which is kind of the beauty of the lyrics, pretty much just commenting on the current state of the United States in 2003, the current state of the world in 2003. Some interesting lyrics throughout the album, a lot of lyrics throughout the album. But there are two things about the album that for me are underwhelming. Is Neil purposely, when they recorded the music, it's with Crazy Horse, minus Frank, because Neil wanted a very stark, simplistic. He didn't want the music to detract from the story and the lyrics. So got a drummer, a bass player, and Neil. We have one acoustic song. We have one song in which Neil's on the organ. Other than that, this is pretty much your sort of standard Neil Young Crazy Horse template with these just grooves that are not that aggressive, that aren't guitar indulgent. We get maybe some nice short solos throughout some of the songs. Pretty much just telling this story. It really is. It almost feels like an audiobook of whatever this musical novel is. And at some point they're like, let's just get some pretty non-distracting music to support the book itself. A lot of mid-tempo stuff, a lot of stuff where we just like, we start off here in this groove, we finish exactly here in this groove. Like, these songs aren't building in intensity. We're not really going anywhere. It almost feels like, I've got a lot of interesting comments on the past couple videos I've done. We're now in the 2000s. I have this whole theory that, and people have sort of given me evidence to help support it, that after Broken Arrow in the late 90s, Neil sort of had reached the end of the first half of his career, and the second half started in 2000 with Silver and Gold, where he was like, his career was to be a musician. He had lost his longtime producer who passed away in the late 90s, so that may also be sort of why the 2000s on feel differently. Someone pointed out that person, David Briggs, wasn't there to say, hey, Neil, this is a bad idea, or hey, Neil, this needs to be edited down. Wasn't able to kind of course correct Neil in real time. And then another comment, I think it was the person who made the comment said that his friend once said that it seems like from this point on, Neil wakes up and goes, oh, I got an idea for an album, quickly writes 10 songs, goes in and records it, and bam, that's the next album. Neil's on to the next thing. And there is that kind of feel to this. Obviously, I would say the the amount of lyrics that are on this and this story of this people who live in Greendale, Neil put some thought into this. I don't know how quickly he's able to come up with lyrics, but that they don't feel like scribbled out like all right, I'm doing this, let's go record this in an hour. But musically it feels like that. Musically it almost feels like, all right, for this song it's in E, I want it like this tempo, here's what I'm playing, fill in, we record it once, we move on. It doesn't feel like, and purposefully, there was a lot put into the album musically. In a weird way, this is quite a stretch, but if you're familiar with this album, maybe you can see where my logic comes from. This album reminds me of Frank Zappa's Thingfish. I am not a fan of Frank Zappa's Thingfish. I recognize that there were a lot of, in the instance of Frank Zappa, possibly way too many ideas in the mix of lyrics that Frank is commenting on. He's using Broadway to comment on society in the 80s, on the AIDS epidemic, on racism, on so many things, on gender fluidity, on sexuality, on just, there is a lot in the Frank Zappa Thingfish lyrical pot. And there's probably a lot that could be analyzed and like discussed that are worthy things. Sorry for, it was a long day yesterday. Long day at work, and then we're in Fiesta here in San Antonio. I lost my voice over the course of the night and day. Sorry. But there's a lot to dissect on Thingfish. However, I have a hard time with the album because musically it frustrates me. Frank recycled a lot of old material. There's a couple of new songs which I think are the clear standouts. Wistful with a Fistful, Clowns on Velvet, in which he brought music that hadn't been released, and it kind of makes those songs better. I think Neil almost is his own worst enemy on this album in the way Frank Zappa is on Thingfish, and that had he put more effort into the music and really allowed the music to shape the lyrics in a much more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but in a different way where it wasn't like every song just felt like, okay, another mid-tempo groove, okay, mid-tempo but a little bit bluesier, okay, another bluesier one, okay, acoustic, but still kind of the same vibe. Okay, 12 minutes of this now. Like, these are long songs. You have 10 songs. It's an 80-minute album. A number of these go over 10 minutes. But they don't go anywhere over the course of the 10 minutes. They're like just driving over the same terrain. Every once in a while we get some nice guitar licks. And if you're not really, really, really heavily invested in the lyrics, I think it's easy to sort of mentally check out. I am someone who has to read lyrics in order to remember them. I'm just not good with lyrics orally, hearing them. I've probably, there are a number of Dead songs I've heard probably thousands of times in my life. And if you ask me to sing them, I probably can't. I can hum every note of music. I can hum the notes of the lyrics, but I can't actually get the words. So for me, something like this, unless I'm sitting down and actually reading the lyrics, I've never been able to fully engage with this album. And when it came out, I was kind of frustrated with the sort of lack of crazy horsepower. And I never really got into this album, and then I returned to it over the years. And so anyways, yeah, a lot of rambling because I feel like I have one friend who thinks this ranks up there with like some of his best albums. I have a number of friends who think this is just utter garbage. I don't think it's utter garbage. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I think it's somewhere in between. But I do think it could have been better. I do think there could have been more. I saw him on this tour when he did the whole thing live. I don't think it was any better. It was more in the moment. There's always the immediacy of being live. When I saw him at Bonnaroo, he only did one song from here, Be the Rain. He had somebody come out, one of the people playing Sun Green, who's a character on here, sort of an activist who, does activist things and chains herself to something and all that kind of stuff, gets arrested for possession, though the charges are dropped because who knows why she was really arrested, right? So we get some realistic storytelling in there about the government sort of like trying to shut down activists. My wife was an activist hardcore in her 20s and had been arrested a number of times for chaining herself to stuff. So I want to connect with what happens in this story in a lot of ways, but musically it just disappoints me. But seeing Big Be the Rain out of context of this album amongst the other songs, it just hit me a little bit more. And I do think that I wish he had toured this and maybe just broken up the story. I don't know. Anyways, 10 songs. I think the first song, Falling From Above, just kind of sets the template in a really good way. Super laid back, but it's got this sort of melodic vibe to it, kind of chill. And we just settle into this groove and we just ride this groove out. It's kind of a good opener. The next two songs are both more bluesier. We still kind of mid-tempo, establish where we are, settle into the groove. Every once in a while, Neil drops some cool licks or maybe gets a really short solo. Double E is the first one, or the second. First of the blues song, the second track. Devil's Sidewalk, the third track. Kind of a little more aggressive, a little nicer of a blues riff, more of a blues bass riff that goes into rock. Leaving the Driving, another slow mid-tempo song. Really cool vibe. I like the vibe on that one. Carmichael, a longer song that definitely has more of a jammy energy. Before we get to the first vocals, we got a lot more of guitar, but it's pretty laid back guitar. We're not getting too aggressive. We're not going out there on like a hurricane type limbs, but it's pretty tasty. Neil's delivery on this, a lot of his vocals, I don't know if they necessarily lack emotion, but he seems to be like, I'm the narrator and I'm just going to narrate and I'm not going to try to put too much of my own like emotional spin on things. So there is this sort of like Neil's voice almost becomes hypnotic, but not in a good way where it's easy for me to check out just because he's just, I don't know, the tone is pretty neutral. It seems almost like a talk sing type thing in a lot of ways. Bandit is an acoustic song. Almost has a Wilco-esque vibe in it, and just the way the vocals are sung and the way the acoustic energy brings like maybe a mid 2000s Wilco vibe or early 2000s Wilco vibe. Grandpa's Interview, a longer song. We get a lot of references to, it was better back in the day. Leave it to Beaver, people. I think we get an actual Leave It to Beaver reference in this. Bringing Down Dinner as an organ vibe. Neil's on organ instead of guitar. Still mid-tempo. Some good bass action in this. And then the last two songs, I think, are two of the best songs on here because they're a little more upbeat. The opening guitar riffs seem like they're a little more like belong in an actual song and aren't just going to devolve into a jam, though they ultimately just kind of devolve into the same jam. Both of them, the bass playing just really seems to step up and seems to be pushing the energy a little bit more. But we get Sun Green, which is about this character who's the activist. We get a whole bunch of crazy stuff in here. We get this cheesy chorus that almost seems like it's comes from a Monty Python movie. We get like speaking, like the FBI is here, and we get random sort of like theatrical noises. We get a Julia Butterfly reference to the activists who climbed the tree. So they lived in a tree for like over a year, so they wouldn't chop it down. So we're very much grounding ourselves in the early 2000s. But I think this song, Sun Green, has by far the most energy and the most drive and the most momentum. And then the following song, Be the Rain, is kind of almost in the exact same vein. We get the most impassioned guitar solos in here, which really isn't saying much, but I think by the end of the album, the guitar solo energy has stepped up. We get some bullhorn action. We get some more like choral type singing from the backing vocalist. My only issue is, like, I wish these songs were separated. I know maybe over the course of the story, lyrically, they need to be back to back, but musically, I just think Sun Green needs to be earlier in the album. We need these like really more driving moments. And by driving, I mean in comparison to the rest of the album, I just think they need to be somewhere else. They need to be separated. And so it ends on a strong note, but it's like a 78, 79-minute journey. It's almost the full CD, 10 songs. I don't know. I want more out of this. I think the potential for this could have been more. I don't want something as drastic as like Zappa's Thingfish, where there are characters and they're acting out and they're speaking and it really is just a Broadway production with music. I don't think Neil needs to resort to that. But I just think musically, just the blues songs can hit harder. Like these grooves that Crazy Horse falls in. Bring in Frank. Let us have a rhythm guitar. Let Neil is so good about taking the emotion of the lyrics and putting whatever he's singing about into a guitar solo so that like you feel it in a more like visceral way because of what he's able to do on the guitar. And I feel like this story like channel Sun Green's activist energy into a really intense guitar solo. Channel Grandpa's like nostalgic rage into a guitar solo. Like it's 80 minutes long, so maybe you just had to like keep it short, but make it a double album. Make some of the songs shorter. I don't know. I just think we're missing something. I think like every once in a while there are really bright moments in here, like a guitar lick, a lyric jumps out at me, but I feel like I'm eating like a bowl of cornflakes, and I like cornflakes. I have no problem with cornflakes, but for some reason, somebody in the factory they were making the cornflake boxes really close to the frosted flake boxes, and every once in a while you get this really sweet frosted flake amidst the cornflake. You're like, oh, that really jumped out at me. But then the next bite is just nothing but cornflakes. It's the way I feel about this album. I feel like I'm enjoying the cornflakes. It's probably healthy for me. It's definitely not going to hurt me. But every once in a while, oh yeah, frosted flake got in the box, and that really stood out. And then I start just looking for the frosted flakes, and I'm disappointed because they don't come as often as they should. Yeah, all right. I haven't eaten breakfast yet, so maybe that's where that came from. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this. Where would I rank the songs? Like I said earlier, I think the best song is Sun Green. Just the energy on that is fantastic. It's a little bit weird. There's just a lot of throwing things in the mix and making it a little more theatrical, but I do think it is one of the stronger songs in the album. And then Be the Rain would be number 2 because it's the most upbeat. Carmichael, that opening guitar energy is really good and sets the tone nicely. The opening Falling From Above, nice chill vibe. Bandits, the acoustic one. Bringing Down Dinner is the organ one. Then we get Grandpa's interview, which is maybe just a little too long and meandering, as a grandpa interview should be, so I shouldn't hold it against it. Leaving the Driving, which has a nice opening riff. But then the 2 blues ones at the bottom, just because, one, they're back-to-back. Another instance in which you have 2 songs which are similar, Double E, Devil's Sidewalk, in comparison to the rest of the songs, Sun Green and Be the Rain. And instead of spreading them out and putting things between them to vary it, like they take up too much of the same space in too short of a period of time. So I think the sequencing is maybe a little off. Musically, though, lyrically, they kind of have to be. And then where would I rank this album among the others? It is not in the top 10. So after the Gold Rush, you were safe. We're trying to make sure the integrity of this list remains by not letting After the Gold Rush fall out of the top 10. But I have it all the way down at number 20, below Reactor. I think it's better than Silver and Gold. When I think about going to listen to Silver and Gold or something like Are You Passionate, I think my expectations are pretty, like I know what I'm going to get. It's kind of safe in a weird way. We're not really going out on any weird, crazy ledges. And though I probably listen to Silver and Gold maybe a little more than Greendale, I think always there's this excitement level in me when I sit down to listen to it because I'm like, all right, maybe it's going to click, and that masterpiece or that just the people who really love this, I'm going to understand why they do on a way because the lyrics are going to hit a little bit better. So every time I do put it on, there's a little bit of like, all right, I'm ready for this, because I always think I'm just going to get it a little bit more or something. That doesn't really happen yet in 22 years, but I have it at 20, which I'm giving Neil props for being ambitious. It's a generous 20, but I have it at 20 for now. All right. Those are my super rambling thoughts on an album that's kind of super rambling. Let me know what you think of this album, all that kind of stuff, what I messed up on, things you know about this album, all that stuff. How comments work, people. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and that's all I got for now. And we got Greendale Live coming up in a couple days. Whoopee. All right. Peace. Talk to you later.